Hi everyone, welcome to the show. My guest this week is Victoria Weaver, artist and Labour Party activist. Victoria, can you tell us a bit more about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm 24 years old. I am an artist. I make music. I've done music for short film before, and I'm also a prominent Labour activist. And I do a lot of work locally, particularly around the town centre, especially around the development over there, which is the alumni development of student flats on the cultural quarter. And I also do a lot of campaigning for the Labour Party.
Now, what you just heard there, just for a bit of clarity, is specifically around the Colchester area, isn't it? Where you do most of your campaigning.
Yeah.
Cool. Um, okay, well, what we're talking about this week is quite a serious issue, and that's the issue of mental health. Um, Both of us sitting here don't claim to be experts in mental health. We've both, um, you know, had experiences of mental health ourselves, both personally and through family members. Um, but yeah, today we're taking a slightly different approach to how we usually do the show. There's not really going to be a lot of structured questions. It's just going to be talking about what's important to us about this issue. Um, if you want to go first.
Yeah. So I personally have been affected by mental health issues. I've been diagnosed with bipolar, but that diagnosis is subject to change soon. And I've gone through my own battles for quite a while. I have to say, this has been in the recent years, it has gotten worse. I've experienced struggles of mental health since about the age of 16. And when you look back at it, I didn't realise it at the time, but when you look back on your experiences, you suddenly realise it was there
The whole time.
the whole time. Yeah.
So even though you started noticing it when you were sort of 16, do you think there was always a part of you that, suffered in some way?
Yeah, I mean, I can remember having mood swings back when I was 16. I think the first one was when I was in high school, and I did become manic,
Yeah.
or what I'd describe as manic. I got into some trouble with the school. My teachers were saying I've completely changed. I used to be a very quiet. You've known me since high school, and I used to
Yeah.
be very quiet and quite reserved. And then suddenly, in this final year, I'd become very, very excitable. I'd become really outgoing and social. I also became a disruption in class, and my teachers were suddenly saying, "Oh, she's changed dramatically," and I did smash a window, the library window at school, and luckily I didn't get expelled for it. But I was always such a good child. I think the teachers just thought it was a one-off.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did get into trouble, and it really affected my grades and my ability to perform as well in school. And that continued into sixth form college, and I remember having ups and downs, and I just sort of passed it off as, it's just me. I have these ups and downs, you know. My first real delusion was in secondary school. No, not secondary school, sixth form,
Mm.
and it was a delusion where I thought I was God. And I remember in art class, I painted myself as a god, and my teacher asked me if I thought I was a god, and I just said, well, maybe. And he asked me if I was okay,
Yeah.
and that was probably one of the first signs of me sort of my mental illness sort of worsening.
So you said you changed quite drastically in that one period in high school. Was there any kind of like inciting incident for that? Anything that triggered that, or was it just, I don't know, puberty?
I don't know. I think the thing is, it's around that time people start to first experience signs of a mood disorder.
Yeah.
So, and that's just me coming into my own, I think, and it's sort of my brain developing. I don't know if there's any trigger for it. Yeah.
I mean, so my own experience with mental health probably started in secondary school as well. So when I was about 12, I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. But then again, I don't know, some part of me doubts. No, I don't doubt that I have, Asperger's. I mean, in the sense that I haven't had any kind of sort of re-diagnosis or any, I just mean, when you diagnose someone at 12, they're going to be a hell of a lot different. I mean, your prefrontal cortex and your brain, I don't think has even finished developing until you're about 25. So, I think we are quite. We put labels on people quite young, and I don't mean, labels in that kind of way. I just mean in terms of we focus all our treatment then on that one definition, and like in your case, that might not have been the best strategy, because recently there's been doubt, you said, over your initial diagnosis of bipolar disorder.
Yeah, well, there's definitely symptoms I'm showing that don't correlate with bipolar.
Yeah.
But I definitely have a mood disorder. I have the ups and downs.
Yeah.
And my medication stops that. But there's been certain things which don't correlate. There's been hallucinations. And there's also been, I've become very withdrawn, I've become very vacant, and I think my family can all see that, and all my friends have all told me I just look really vacant all the time, and my dad was in the doctor's appointment with me, with my CPN, the other day, and how he described it was, I'm just like a shell. It's like speaking to a shell. And I've had people saying I've been acting really bizarrely, and out of character, saying things that are a bit off, and and my classmates have all said I've just been very strange, so that it's difficult, and it is because at this stage in my life, it's in the 20s to mid-20s where mental illness really sort of develops.
Yeah.
So I'm in that stage where I'm developing mental illness, and it's just all happening right now.
Yeah. I mean, so I quite a lot of people know this about me, not through the pages that I run and that kind of thing, but personally, people know that I struggled with quite a severe depression for a while. Only in the last couple of years, really. And it's something I feel I've come out on top of. There's been an enormous sense of overcoming, especially what was the worst period, and it's not like this for many people, but if you are able to sort of pull yourself out of it, it's a very gratifying experience. But I feel once that door's been opened, there's always a risk that you're going to go back through it. It always stays open afterwards. There's always that sort of lingering.
I found that, and especially since I went into hospital in February, and it changes you.
Yeah.
It changes everything. I've been to hospital 4 times, and it really is quite a surreal experience. And I found myself in and out of hospital this past year, trying to deal with my own mental illness.
Yeah, I mean, part of that's the problem with the current state of, some of the services that we have available for mental health, and how it kind of feels. I don't think this is the fault of the doctors or the nurses.
No.
Because I think ultimately it's a case of resources and lack thereof. So I think a lot of them do the best they can under the circumstances, but it's not really enough with the sheer numbers that we're seeing these days. And to be honest with me, look, when I was on antidepressants for a year and a half, maybe 2 years. It took me 10 minutes to be prescribed them. This is first appointment with the GP. Possibly spoke to an out of hours nurse or something. I can't really remember the circumstances, but it was not a lot of steps. Within 10 minutes of this GP review, they suggested taking antidepressants. Now, I'm not saying that was the wrong decision, but I just feel, how can you know within 10 minutes that that's going to be, without any real investigation into my history of medical history, but also mental health. And then afterwards, I think that's part of the problem, because we, a lot of people then treat antidepressants as kind of the answer somehow. When in actual fact, they don't. I don't know if this is explained well enough, that they're essentially stabilizers. And
one of the not scary, or what is it? I wouldn't say it's scary. One of the more disturbing things is actually 10 minutes really isn't enough. If you are bipolar, quite often, you'd have a depressive episode, you'd go into the doctor, and the doctor wouldn't do that full assessment, and so they might just say, oh, you're depressed now because you're going through depression, and they'll prescribe you antidepressants.
Yeah.
And the thing about antidepressants is, if you give them to someone who's bipolar, it will trigger a manic episode. And actually, if your doctor just prescribed you antidepressants there and then, and you turned out to be bipolar, but that could make you send you off into a mania and then maybe a hospital trip.
But then, like I said, some part of you doesn't blame them because of what we're seeing now. It seems like an epidemic of mental health. Going to your GP now sort of feels like it's like a conveyor belt. They're just trying to get people out, and process everyone.
Yeah.
Just because it seems like that's all they can do. If they had more time and they had more resources, then they could actually...
I do think there's such a huge problem at the moment regarding mental health services, because a lot of it GPs are having to rely on doing things themselves, like prescribing antidepressants.
Yeah.
And you've got this mental health system where people who aren't deemed sick enough are just they're put in a long waiting list for a phone interview, and there's no parity between mental and physical health. If you have a physical ailment, you go to the doctors and they can see you straight away. If you have a mental illness, it could take you months.
Yeah.
And it's only when people reach the point of crisis when they actually get help there and then. So if you're one of those patients that's really bad, you get all the help you need.
Yeah.
But if not, you're put on a long waiting list, and that can make things much worse. And then you've got things like even for the crisis team, they can't do much.
Yeah.
If you go to the hospital, you have to wait hours and hours and hours for a mental health team to come and assess you.
Yeah.
And same with my, I go to a psychosis team, and there doesn't seem to be enough CPNs there to deal with all the patients. It took me a month to get an appointment with my current care coordinator because there was no one else around to deal with me at the time. So I was just speaking to duty nurses, and it's all round. The whole mental health system, it needs to be looked at and rehauled.
Yeah.
And it needs to work.
I agree with you there, but I also believe that some part of this we need to look at this as a societal, all the societal factors that go into this. One thing it's tough to say, but there is, I think the thing about mental health, we have tried so hard to remove the stigma from it that I fear we've gone too far the opposite direction. It's almost satirized now. Satirized. As in it's just everywhere, and it's so commonplace. Everyone seems to have a mental health problem, and I'm not denying that people do, but then there are other things that people need to look at in terms of lifestyle. So when people say that they feel miserable and they feel depressed, and at the same time that they're not getting enough daylight, they're also spending a lot of their time online on social media.
Poor diet.
Very poor diet, no exercise, and watching society collapse in real time on their phone.
And I think stresses in society nowadays are a big part of it.
Yeah.
And but the thing is, it didn't seem to happen so often in the past than it did now, and something has changed where nowadays we're experiencing a sort of mental health crisis, if you like, and it does make you wonder what is the root cause of it. Is it to do with modern society? And
yes, well, part of it is the way that especially people of the millennial generation have essentially grown up with less self-esteem, much lower self-esteem. Some of that is in the way that they've been raised, where some of the competitiveness has maybe been taken out of early life. You see now, people get participation trophies for coming in last. I don't think things like that are helpful, and I don't think setting your kids up to fail is a good thing for their future. I think, because this is the thing, people of our generation, we think quite highly of ourselves, and I think a lot of that is actually justified. But then that massive culture shock when you suddenly go into the world of work after years of living in a bubble, especially university. For me, that's what it was like as well. It was kind of 3 years in this big bubble of, it's not really the real world. It's like an idealized version of the world and how society should operate. Everyone goes to the pub every night, and everything's sort of in one place, and everything's quite easy to do. You can get by. You can still get a degree. You can scrape it by on maybe like a lower. It's not even really about the degree. It's kind of, but it's and you get loans to pay for it. None of it's really real. And then you get out, and suddenly you are basically made to believe you don't matter. You have to earn people's respect. They're not just going to give it to you. So there's this huge culture shock of actually going into the world of work, the world of taxes, the world of higher life, and a lot of great things come with it. Your independence, actual independence of working hard for things, and the gratification you feel when you've bought something that you've worked hard to pay for. That is intensely amazing, but there's also it is just a concrete wall of contradictions and therefore stress, and there's no one to really turn to. We're not really talking to each other about these things with our friends and that kind of. We're still so distracted by all the other things going on.
And we do live in a world where, with social media, everyone's looking for instant gratification.
They're getting it as well.
Yeah,
it's addictive.
It's addictive, isn't it?
We're a generation of addicts. We don't. Part of that, I don't know. Maybe we need to look at
and
age restrictions to social media. I swear to God, like, kids should not be on social media.
No.
Come on, little kids. Like so I have nieces and nephews, right? I've got how old is she? 5 or 6 year old niece who has. I'm pretty sure she has an iPad, and like the kids. Some of them are like 10 years old. They're on Facebook.
Yeah.
And it's mad.
It's mad because it used to be like restriction was 13, and like people below 13 didn't have social media.
Yeah.
And there's all changed.
I don't remember that.
And there was. I remember when we were little, there was all this scare in the news about should children be allowed to have phones and stuff.
Yeah.
And nowadays it's really commonplace.
I wasn't allowed to walk to school alone, even though I used to live less than 2 minutes walk from my school. I wasn't allowed to walk to school alone until I got to year 5, and yet, kids younger than that now are allowed phones, so they just have access to the world, and all the bad stuff and all the good stuff, but all the bad stuff as well.
What kind of things are they being exposed to? Because if they've got the internet, they're being exposed to all kinds of stuff, stuff they probably shouldn't be exposed to at that young age,
Exactly. My nephew is 10 and he's using VPN. Like, he knows what he's doing.
I don't even know.
I don't even know how to use it. It's like Nordic VPN, it allows you. It's like anonymity on the internet. I don't even know how to do that.
I don't know how to do that. I didn't even know.
I won't even update ABG, but like, I think this is some of it is where this is coming. We're just overloading them too young, and they're growing up. And this is the thing about addictive behaviours. It gets to a point you're not satisfied. That's why you have to keep taking hits of it.
Yeah.
And like you said, technology, social media are prime examples of this. They are going to be, and to be honest, as we've seen from the past, none of these epidemics, get handled very well. They are, they're always two extremes. We're probably going to, see some kind of prohibition, or someone attempting some kind of prohibition, like they did with alcohol, and like they did with, tobacco in the past, and and it will backlash. People will just go to other. It's like on China, for example, they ban Facebook and Twitter, and so many Chinese people are on Facebook anyway. They find ways.
They find ways to do it.
Yeah, probably VPN. But you can't stop people. That's the thing. So how do we encourage sort of better lifestyle? Who's the onus on to promote better lifestyles? That I'm not saying that's going to eradicate things like mental health.
No.
But maybe it will make you better. Maybe if we set ourselves right, then maybe we'll be better prepared for it.
Yeah.
Other people will be better able to talk about it, especially if a friend is having problems, and and they're aware of the right way to approach people, or just listen to people. But also, if we make it so maybe a lot of people never needed medical attention. Maybe it was just something they could change within their own lifestyle.
Yeah.
And then we can, because I think that's the thing as well. There's a lot of people using the system. Some of whom, again, need to, just have to look at their lifestyle.
Maybe it's education as well.
Maybe it's education. Well, I think everything goes into it. We haven't had the best last decade.
No.
And
it's all new. This is all new, basically. We are the first generation, really, where we're having to discover the social media, its impacts, and we've just gone all to town on it because it's never really occurred before in history.
Well, that's the thing. We're the first generation to essentially live two lives, one online and one in real life. So first generation to do that, but also as we over time, the way civilizations have learned to communicate with each other. It's usually been a messy process. In fact, I would bet most of the wars in history are probably down to miscommunication.
Mm.
So you can see probably it probably had early, you had the Neanderthals wiped out by Homo sapiens, like some of the oldest, earliest ancestors probably, so you can see that the history of trying to communicate with each other is messy at first. And I think this is why there's so much negativity online, because this is a completely new way of speaking to people, a completely new way of communicating, where everything's sort of packaged and streamlined. And I think we're still working it out. We're working out how to communicate with each other on it. And I think that's one of the reasons for a lot of the friction. I think somewhere down the line, we're talking, years down the line, we will get better at doing this. I think it will. We're also, I'm not saying all that bad stuff on the internet's going to go away. I'm just saying I think we're going to be better at handling it.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think we're going to just sort of evolve. And there's always, with evolution, there's always a period of sort of this where we don't know how to handle things, but then we find a way, it's always that human civilization has to catch up with the changes, and that's present in every walk of life. I mean, it's really present with the older generation. The older generation is struggling to keep up with these massive amounts of changes that are occurring in the 20th century.
That's another problem.
Century.
Every generation feels kind of set against each other.
Yeah.
Boomers against millennials against Gen X and probably the next ones. I'm already hating kids. Of the next generation, I've already become that old man. I feel like I've skipped several steps.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think some of it's that we've kind of lost our way in our world. We're kind of given this promise when we're young that the world is ours, and we find out later on it's really not. It's really not. What would you like to see improved in the system? The mental health services, the system at large. What do you think would help?
I think it would really help if there were more staff in all areas of the mental health system. It would help if if people who are referred for mental health counselling actually get counselling within 4 weeks or so. It would and definitely have more school counsellors to deal with child psychology and mental health in schools, I think. But overall it does need more funding. It needs to be looked at, how can we improve the waiting times? How can we improve the crisis teams and stuff? How can we bring that number down
fundamentally as well?
And the crisis teams don't always always work. I mean, there has been times when the crisis team have discharged patients and that patient has gone on to hurt themselves or go into crisis mode again. I mean, when I went into crisis once, I was saying, I don't want to take these pills because I had this delusion that these pills had been poisoned by the doctors. I was saying they're poison. If I take them, I'm going to cut my stomach open.
Jesus.
And what happened is they forced me to take them. So as soon as I took them, I went out of the hospital. I was saying, I'm going to bleach myself. I'm going to cut them out of my stomach. And I went home and tried to do exactly that.
Jesus.
Indeed, so...
I don't think I've ever heard you tell that story.
No. And my parents had to get the knife off me. I tried to do it with a spoon. They had to take the spoon off me. And I was completely delusional. I had lost touch with reality so much. And the crisis team should have seen that, really. Because they should have seen the signs that I was going to hurt myself when I was within their care.
Yeah.
They should have said, "Oh, she said she's going to hurt herself. We have to take that seriously." But it seemed like they didn't take it seriously at the time. They were more interested in getting the meds in me, and then just discharging me as soon as possible, because there's not enough bed spaces in hospitals.
Yeah.
Actually, talking about bed spaces, there's so few bed spaces that are sending people halfway across the country just to get a bed.
Yeah, I've heard about this. Like, people in England go to Scotland.
Yeah. And so...
Some of the children as well,
Yeah.
so you think that the parents, they have to keep commuting back and forth across the country to see their kids.
It's not very good, because no one wants to be stuck in a hospital
It's counterproductive
hundreds of miles
to their...
away from their
Exactly.
home.
You're just isolating someone who's already feeling quite isolated.
Exactly. And the care teams are more worried about stopping people from going into hospital at whatever cost, even if it's not the right decision. So I think, sometimes we need to scrutinise the crisis teams.
Yeah.
And their actions sometimes.
But also, it's a symptom of a bigger problem. Like you said, well, the current... I don't know if I don't think it's just about the system. I don't think the current system is equipped to handle the kind of numbers we're seeing. But I think we've got to turn our efforts to trying to lower those numbers. But we've seen more and more things become just merely transactional. Things like sex, things like, commitment doesn't really feel like it's the same thing anymore. It doesn't last years usually. Something like 90% of the, something like 90% of the relationships you have before you're 30 will end. That's not necessarily a discouraging statistic when you use it in the context of, for me, it's kind of like there are things you just kind of have to accept. Like, knowing that for me is good, that 90% of the relationships you have before you're 30 will likely end, statistically speaking. So I think that's a good incentive to not put all your hopes into one person. I'm not saying avoid relationships or avoid commitment. And by all means, if you find that person that's special to you, but you could save yourself, if it doesn't, and statistically speaking, it's going to end, then you are much better prepared to deal with that, because you knew that was always a possibility anyway. So some part of you always knew that. And there are other kind of things I think we can improve upon in terms of our outlook, just by being practical. I mean, I absolutely love Stoic philosophy. Stoicism is really making a comeback at the moment. I think that's really encouraging, because Stoicism, I don't know, I mean, I've always been interested in Buddhism and this kind of thing. I think Stoicism goes quite well with Buddhism. Buddhism, especially the first adage of Buddhism, is that life is suffering. But that's not something to be, it's not something to despair over. Because ultimately, I don't think life is supposed to be happy. I think it's supposed to be meaningful. And I think people put too much emphasis on trying to make it happy, that they miss out on the stuff that's actually going to make them happy, which is just experiencing life. Just really, really experiencing it. And that means, being there, being present and aware and mindful. And really, life is the story of how you overcame the obstacles in life, because they're going to happen. Life is a wheel, you're on the bottom and, you'll get on top, and then, it keeps changing like that. And I think having some common sense and being reasonable and realistic about the kind of hurdles life is going to throw at you, then you can dedicate more time to getting prepared. And, knowing that some good usually comes out of situations, no matter how bad they are. There is some good out of it. maybe it wasn't the right time. Like a relationship ends. Maybe there's probably some good in that. It wasn't right. You know, it wasn't right for either of you.
Maybe it is indicative of a society where we've stopped believing in something, and we sort of believe nothing.
It's God, I think, that we stopped believing in. You see, what we've seen in the years is the decline of, you know, religion, especially in the West. Especially like Church of England is not what it was.
No.
That used to kind of be, you know, we've got bishops in the House of Lords. That's how kind of fundamental the Church of England seems, you know, to Britain. But it doesn't really seem like that now. You know, the church membership has gone down and it's still going down.
Yeah.
But I don't think I think belief has gone down in terms of God. But I think people still crave religion because everyone kind of craves to be part of something bigger than themselves. So I think we've actually made other things into religions. We've made social justice into religion. Yeah. We've made climate change into a religion.
And politics.
We've made politics into a religion. We've made TV. We've made Netflix into a religion.
Social media.
Exactly. And with all religions, you get the classic casting out of the heretics, you know, the shunning of the non-believers, the punishing.
Yeah.
But unlike religion, because you don't have that kind of religious aspect to it, there's no forgiveness, and that makes it worse than religion. Worse than the Church of England, at least.
Yeah.
You know?
It's because nothing exists anymore. Like, people don't have that sort of belief, even if it's even if it's something like Stoicism or another philosophy. I think people are just generally quite nihilistic sometimes, and that's the way society has progressed. So it's almost like we're trying to fill the void with things.
Have you ever heard of the expression positive nihilism?
No, I haven't.
I mean, it's just because I don't think it necessarily always has to be a pessimistic thing, nihilism. Because ultimately, if you believe that there's no meaning to life, in the kind of, you know, perspective of, look how the scale of us in terms of the universe.
Yeah.
We are not even if the whole universe was a beach, we wouldn't even make up one grain of sand. And so, you know, looking at it like that, to me, kind of opens up more freedom to believe what you want to believe about being good, because, you know, it's just the right thing to do. And actually that makes your life more meaningful. The meaning of life is that life has meaning. If you can somehow make your life meaningful out of the complete randomness of your existence, if you can somehow make the most random and chaotic existence ever meaningful, then you've kind of won the game of life.
Yeah.
You know, you've managed to completely reshape the nature of it. What advice would you give someone right now?
Right now?
Who's going through maybe the same kind of stuff we did, or maybe, you know, something of their own?
I think the best thing you can do is let someone know. Someone preferably close to you. Someone who cares for you. You've got to let them know, because you can't do it on your own. You can't handle it on your own, you know, even if you think you can, because it will get worse. And make sure you let someone know. Always talk to them. Always keep them updated. And if you're having problems with your mental health, just keep calling up your local mental health services, or keep going to your GP, calling up the crisis team if you need to. Just, you have to keep pestering them to get the care you want. The more you pester them, the more likely they are to give you the right care. And if you are feeling particularly bad, don't be hesitant to ring the crisis team or the Samaritans, which are a good number to, which will give you advice. And yeah, you know, you have to keep at it.
Yeah.
And you just have to let someone know, because you won't be able to do it on your own.
Absolutely. And also just talking about, like, you take for granted how good it feels to just get things out and how much clarity it gives you on stuff as well. I always find that after I've actually explained, talked to someone, I always find when I talk to someone, then it's a lot clearer in my head afterwards. But I also say, challenge yourself to, change your outlook on things. I'm not saying, force yourself to be positive all the time, but try and see things from a kind of different perspective. Like I said, trying to see the good that can come of things. And also try to see the value in yourself and also the value in things that you enjoy. And avoid, destructive behaviours. It may seem like a great idea to just get lost in, just go on a bender and, drugs and alcohol, and it's not a good idea.
Yeah, I would second that.
It's a really bad idea.
Drugs and alcohol, it's so common for people with mental illness to fall into drugs and alcohol, and it really doesn't do you any favours.
I'm talking daily as well. And the worst part is, by the time when I was suffering from depression, I got into the cycle of drinking every day, and it literally gets to the point where I wasn't drunk, really, even though I was kept drinking.
Yeah.
You build up such a tolerance that you don't realise the damage that you're probably doing.
I've had a lot of problems with alcohol before, and it got to the point where everyone just knew me as Alcoholic Victoria.
Yeah.
And it does impact your life, and especially if you have an underlying mental health condition, you may be trying to self-medicate yourself with alcohol, but sooner or later that will catch up to you.
Yeah.
And it does
sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
It will catch it. Sooner than you think.
Yeah.
These things take their toll. And again, try to change your environment if you can get up, if you can summon the strength to get up. And really, progress is progress, no matter how small, no matter how slow. But also, things like being outdoors, away from technology. Do yourself a favour, just, take a walk without the phone.
It really does help. Like, I'm struggling right now. I've had a lot of difficult times, but I always try to get out once a day, just to try and remove myself and try and lift my mood up, and it is hard. Yeah. It's really hard, I just get bored at home, I don't do anything.
Yeah.
And it takes its toll, so I have to get out, and even if it's just for a walk, I just get out and...
It's doing something, and it's more significant than it seems. But things like, exercise as well. Exercise is a massive recovery tool. Again, exercise can be addictive, but it's all about finding the balance in the things that you do. For me, getting into a good sort of workout plan, and that's the kind of thing, planning for stuff is enormously helpful, because then you're taking control of something in your life. You're taking control of your time.
Yeah.
Putting more control into your own hands over your own life, because for so much of the time it feels like it's just out of our hands and it's random. I promise you, yes, there are things that are completely random. There are things that are completely out of your hands and are hypothetical. But there is so much as well that is malleable and that you are able to take control of. Time is one of them. Your body is another thing. We've talked about diet, sleep, how much time you spend around screens.
It's incredibly important. It is. Studies have shown diet and exercise and sleep are all really important factors, They're really important.
I'd also say meditation as well.
Yeah, meditation,
That was
mindfulness.
enormously helpful
Yeah.
on my road to recovery.
Yeah.
But yeah, even if it's not meditation, if it's not full on, just being mindful. Again, like we said, when you're out in nature, that's the thing. Go for walks. Don't feel like a commute. That doesn't really count into, because you're going towards a destination. There's a purpose to it. Let it just be a free thing, and just let the mind wander. And another thing is, we need to read more.
Yeah.
We really need to read more.
Definitely.
I'm talking, philosophy.
And it really helps.
History.
In a mental health, for mental health, it really helps if you can find books that are books on depression or bipolar, books about CBT and mindfulness.
CBT was incredible. I did a CBT course.
On it.
It was amazing. So I encourage anyone to do that if they get the opportunity. One of my favourite authors for those kind of about mindfulness is the Dalai Lama, the 14th. And again, you read his books and you do not need to be Buddhist. What he sort of writes about is so universal. And he in a lot of his books he talks about the sort of idea of seeing yourself as you really are, and the benefits of mindfulness and meditation in life, but also just trying to share people's experiences, trying to put yourself in other people's shoes. Everyone you've ever met, everyone's had a day, everyone's had ups and downs, and you don't know that the person you get into an argument with on the streets, they may have had a terrible day. You never know. You have to kind of try and imagine scenarios around. I know what I mean, just imagine their suffering. That sounds bad, but trying to imagine what they might be going through. Everything has a reason to it. The way people act towards you, the way people talk to you, it all comes from somewhere. It could be it's usually from experiences they've had. Well, that's all we've got time for today. I'd like to thank my guest Victoria Weaver so much for taking the time to do this interview today. Lots of personal things have been discussed, and I really want to thank you for that. We'll be back next week at the same time. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you soon.